It said that some of America's first steps toward liberty were taken in the bars of Boston. Now, here in New Hampshire, we've got a liberty-loving bar owner running for Congress. State Senator Andy Sanborn joins us this Sunday. We appreciate your being here. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me, and same thing. Happy Father's Day to all the dads out there.
On a more somber note, let's reflect on something that happened last week down in Washington. The shadow of political violence cast itself over the Capitol in a very terrible way. These are potentially men who could be your colleagues. What were you thinking as you watched this unfold?
I mean, look what happened in Washington this week with Representative Scalise and all the other members down there. I mean, it's an absolute tragedy, and it's just a senseless, deplorable act. I mean, part of this political process that we're all involved in today is about discussing and debating, ideas about how do we solve problems and what's the best solution for our country. Should never, ever resort to violence. It's just not what the American people are about. It's not what we believe in. Let's debate. Let's have a robust conversation about our future, and then we need to get back to those premises of maybe going back out to lunch together and spending some time. This rhetoric and this anger across the nation today because some people did or didn't get their way. It's time for us to tone it back down. And at this point, our thoughts and prayers really need to be with the representative and everyone that was injured in this time, and I hope for a speedy recovery for everybody.
Does it give you any pause at all, thinking about running, if this is a potential reality you could face down there?
I don't think it's a reality or a common, or at least I hope that it's not. As I just said, I really hope that we can get back to, what we see in New Hampshire, where we can have a real robust debate and a real conversation, and all of us are very passionate about what our positions are. But at the end of that, we have to go back and be good friends. We have to recognize there's things we're all working on together tomorrow, and that to me really needs to be our focus.
We've learned that the suspect in this case was a volunteer for the campaign of Bernie Sanders. The senator has disavowed him completely on the Senate floor. But do you read anything into that at all, the political affiliation there, or is that a separate part of this completely?
Yeah, I think it's an entirely separate part. I mean, look, we all know today that there's a fair amount of angst across the country on both sides of the political spectrum. And the thing that I would say to people is, hey, let's come back together. At the end of the day, we're one people and we're one country. Have a debate, make sure we're all engaged, but still recognize at the end of the day, it's mothers, it's fathers, it's brothers, it's sisters, and look for the debate tomorrow if you don't win your point today. It's an ever-changing environment that we operate in this whole political arena. So, let's go back and debate. Work hard, be passionate about what we're passionate for, but remember, respect each other, love each other, and still be friends at the end of the day.
How do we stop these kinds of shootings from happening?
Again, I'm a guy that doesn't believe that guns shoot people as much as pencils made me a bad speller, because I don't spell well. Look, bad people are going to do bad things every single day, right? And it's our hope that we can bring our country back together and bring our people back together and recognize the fact that we are one, and fighting amongst ourselves at this level just isn't what our society is supposed to be. It's not what we do. Look, you know me, I'm called a happy warrior because I love the debate process. I love to engage people in real thoughtful discussion, but it should never lead to the point where people's frustrations and angers are so bad that they lash out. That just isn't who we are. And I'm hopeful it just never happens again.
After Sandy Hook, we saw some brief bipartisan agreement that something perhaps could be done in the area of mental health and firearms. Do you think there's anything that should be done if someone is dangerously mentally ill to ensure that their access to firearms is restricted in some way?
Look, as you know, as a state senator today that that I am, we've done a tremendous amount on the mental health arena in the past 3 or 4 years. We actually just passed a budget this week that's going to come to the full Senate floor next week to talk about our mental health issues, and we recognize, both sides of the aisle recognize, there's a lot more that we can do. Chief Justice John Broderick has been very instrumental in bringing that conversation to the forefront. So we're committing some real resources, both financially, intellectually, and with words on both sides of the aisle to recognize people need help, right? And those people that need help, we're going to step up and we're going to do our best to help them.
You're in your 4th term in the state Senate, as you mentioned there. You're referring to yourself as the conservative conscience of the Senate. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so I'm pretty honest. I never wanted to be a politician. I never woke up and said being in that political spectrum was what I saw myself doing. But like so many other people, I just became so frustrated that I didn't think that our policymakers and our politicians were listening to us anymore. Maybe their mouths had gotten a lot bigger than their ears. And as a small business owner, as a generation New Hampshire native, my frustration led to the level where I said, look, I think I can contribute to this. And so I made that decision to become politically active. And one thing I know that people appreciate about me is the fact I've been very, very consistent. I think our taxes are too high. I think our regulations are too steep. I think at this point government is trying to be everyone's master when it's supposed to be its servant. So my consistency in that value set of really working for the people of New Hampshire, I consider myself to be their employee, not their employer. And so I just try to put the people first, and they continue to say, my taxes are too high, the regulations too steep. Go over there to the State House, stand tall, stand firm for those types of things. And so that's this reputation I have is that I fight for the people first, more so than I fight for like the establishment.
You've certainly never been afraid to sort of buck your own party's leadership there in the Senate. If you go to Washington, certainly the dynamic at the moment, and who knows what it would be after 2018, but you have a Republican president, Republican House, Republican Senate. Is there any issue that you would see yourself opposing President Trump on in Washington?
So first and foremost, I think 2018 is going to be a great election year for Republicans. Look, we're on the cusp of getting some things done and getting more done than we've seen come out of Washington in literally decades. We're talking about tax reform. We're talking about cutting back regulations. We're talking about repatriating money back to America, fixing our roads, fixing our bridges, making our economy really run across the country again. So I think it's going to be a good and exciting time for Republicans in D.C. Now, as it talks about the fact, do I stand up to party leaders? I'm not afraid to stand up to anyone if I'm working to defend the people of this state, right? Because that is the job number one of this thing. I'm proud that I will compliment anyone that does a good job, and I won't be afraid to stand up and criticize if I need to those that I think aren't representing our values or aren't representing the people of New Hampshire.
But can you name a single issue right now where you disagree with President Trump?
I'd love him to get off Twitter.
There you go. And so just last week, the Washington Post had reported that the president is essentially under investigation by the special counsel for obstruction of justice. What's your take on this? Is this making a mountain out of a molehill, as many Republicans feel, or is there a serious constitutional question here?
As you know, I've always traveled the state a lot in my role as a state senator, and will continue to do so as a candidate for Congress. And in New Hampshire, and the people I talk to, they are so much more concerned today with whether or not they're going to be able to have enough money in their checking account at the end of the month to feed their family, to pay their mortgage, and they're questioning if they have good health care and is their job going to be there next week. I understand that the allegations happening in Washington, D.C., need to be investigated, and they should be, but there seems to be some fascination by some members of the press and the political class, and they've taken their eye off the ball of what we really need to be working on, right? Let's get back to the things that we told people we'd work on. That we need to look at how much money they're paying in taxes, make sure their jobs are safe, make sure that the country is safe. Those are the things that I hear from people that they want us to be working on. And that's the stuff I'll work on.
You mentioned the priorities right now. They're working on health care in Washington. The American Health Care Act, from a big picture sense, will likely reduce the number of people who have health care coverage, but also reduce taxes. Why is that an acceptable trade-off?
I don't believe that's really what the trade-off is. We have to remember that when we look to expand Medicaid expansion, which is part of Obamacare, which I've been very clear from the start, it's a failed program, and it's really on its bad legs. That nearly 2/3 of the people that ended up going on to Medicaid expansion actually already had insurance. So part of this whole CBO calculation that they made when they say people will lose insurance, they're talking about how many people will come off the plan, but not how many people will go back to their old plans. So I think we just need to be a little careful to make to work on that rhetoric that says, oh my God, things are going to be horrifically bad. I think we can find a solution. I mean, look, I've been on the forefront of talking about health care and how we need to solve it, and the legislators need to get back to this thing where we're talking first about affordability and accessibility. This thing took kind of a left-hand turn, and it turned into, let's just make it free for everyone and put everyone on some sort of a government program, and that's not the American way. So I believe that we'll have a great solution to health care. I do believe that it's actually going to work and be much more of what the American people want. And then at the same time, tax reform is very, very important to me. I'm in charge of the revenue estimations and tax policy for the state of New Hampshire today, and there are very few people in this state that tell me they want higher taxes.
We mentioned before you're a restaurant and bar owner. What perspective does that give you? Owning a bar, how does that help you in politics, I guess?
Look, to me,
other than the obvious.
Other than it started in a restaurant, right? I mean, I think one of the best things about owning a restaurant is, I'm one of the only state senators that actually still works for a living. And so I go to work every night. I meet people at the restaurant. I stand at their tables and talk to them. So I get to hear what's truly important to the people of this state, hardworking, everyday people. So I don't have this insulation that a lot of the political class has up at the State House, that if you can see the gold dome, that they have some sense of reality that might not be the reality that everyone else hears. So it truly allows me to keep it real and talk to people who are everyday people who aren't necessarily that political, to hear what's truly important. And that's what allows me to have such a great, fresh perspective about the things we should be working on and fighting for, because I hear it from the actual everyday people.
We asked you where you might oppose Trump. On the flip side of that, do you see any issues where you'd reach across the aisle and work with Democrats?
Look, I'm very, very proud of my ability, although I'm known as the conservative conscience, that I'm not afraid to say, look, this isn't the role of our government. This isn't the role of Republicans. We need to stick to what our value sets on those types of things. That over the past few terms that I've been a state senator, that nearly 50% of the bills that I've put in have actually been co-sponsored with Democrats. So there are obviously places that we can work together, and I'm the type of guy that can, I'll work with anyone, anywhere, anytime, anyhow. Still not afraid to stand up for my values, and I have a reputation of knowing where you have to stop that line on the compromise. The first person that congratulated me on making the decision to run for Congress was actually a Democrat Senate Minority Leader, Jeff Woodburn, one of my closest friends. Look, we debate like heck. We're different on lots of policies. He's much more moderate than I am, but we can still have a good time. And I cherish his relationship, and everyone's up there, because it shows that we can work hard, we can fight for our value set, but we can still be respectful and be friends.
All right. Senator Andy Sanborn, thank you for joining us for Close Up today. We'll see you out there on the campaign trail.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate the time.
We appreciate you being here.